I love putting together brunch menus and always try to incorporate both sweet and savory items to make it kind of a well-balanced meal. It can be a healthy, hearty, and delicious way to start the day. On today's episode of Paula Roy's Favorite Foods, I've got 3 ideas that you can prepare ahead of time and bake up fresh in the morning for a warm, satisfying, and sure to be appreciated brunch. How does hot, fresh muffins on demand sound to you? I don't know why I never thought of this before, but I recently discovered that you can freeze muffin batter right in the pan and then bake them up whenever you want, 1, 2, 6, or a dozen muffins. I'm going to show you how easy it is to pull off this magic trick. First, we've got our dry ingredients to be prepared. I've got flour here. To it, I'm adding some baking powder, baking soda, and salt. Not too much salt because there's also going to be melted butter in this recipe. I'm also putting cornmeal in these muffins because I love that it makes them more substantial. And for seasoning, you guessed it, my favorite, cardamom. Cinnamon would be delicious, so would ginger. Anything that goes well with blueberries. So we'll quickly stir together our dry ingredients, then we'll switch over to the other bowl. So interestingly, for this recipe, I'm mixing the liquids and the sugar together, and that helps the sugar start to dissolve. And I think that that helps with the freezing process. Normally, you would just put the sugar in with the dry ingredients. We've got 1/4 cup of milk, and of course, as always with my recipes, if I recommend non-dairy options, you know that they've been tested and they're going to be good. So definitely oat or other non-dairy milks would be great. This is plain yogurt, and you could absolutely use a dairy-free yogurt if you prefer. And I find this helps to make the muffins extra moist, and they seem to keep their structure well. Lemon juice, because I love the combination of blueberry and lemon zest for an extra lemon kick. You could do orange if that's a flavor combo that you like. And last but not least, 1 egg. And we will whisk all this together, just enough to get it blended and to get the egg mixed in. And if you're not already aware of this, when a recipe calls for a room temperature egg, they're not kidding. It actually incorporates much better when you're beating it. So I always take them out of the fridge ahead of time or pop them in lukewarm water for a couple of minutes if I forgot to do so. All right, there's our liquid ingredients all set. And last but not least, we'll add our melted butter. You could use vegetable oil or coconut oil if you prefer in place of the butter. I haven't tried it with margarine, but I'm sure that would work well, and there are some dairy-free margarines now available if that's of interest to you. So now we combine the two, and it's just a one and done kind of pouring. Make sure you scrape it out so you don't leave too much behind. And give it a quick stir. You don't want to overwork a muffin batter because that's part of what will make muffins feel kind of tough. So just a quick stir until you can't see any dry ingredients, and then you know that you're ready to go. All right, I'm pretty happy with that because they're going to get a tiny bit more stirring in a minute when we add the blueberries, but I do this in a tricky way. So here I've got my muffin pan all prepared, and I like these parchment muffin liners. If you haven't tried them before, they're much superior to the old-fashioned paper ones that I grew up using. They really don't stick to the food, and they hold their shape well. So I'm going to start by putting about 1/3 of a muffin paper full of batter in each one. As you can see, I'm using a large cookie scoop or muffin scoop. Makes this job so much easier and less messy. All right, and the next step is to add just about a teaspoon of blueberries at this point. By layering the berries, it seems to keep them from sinking to the bottom of the muffin. So you get better distribution when you're eating your muffins. And you don't have to be too precise. You can see that these still have ice crystals on them. I use frozen berries most of the time and just take them out of the freezer at the last minute. Now the rest of the berries we're going to fold into the batter. So we'll give it another quick stir. And that's a chance to get any last little bits of dry ingredients that are lurking in the bottom. There we go. And now we will top up our muffin tin. Easier if I hold the tin, I think. And just try and get them fairly equal. You can always do a little adjusting at the end with a small spoon if you need to. The more I make these, the easier I'm getting it to judge the amount of batter. This recipe is definitely scaled for 12 muffins. A few little runaway bits here, tuck them back in. Now I can see where I can go back and top up a few of them. The idea of making them even is not so that people fight over the big muffins or small muffins, but rather that they will bake more evenly if they're the similar size to each other or the same size. There, I'm pretty happy with that. So this tray will go into the freezer just as is, don't need to cover it or anything. It takes about 2 to 3 hours depending on your freezer for them to freeze solid, and then you transfer them to an airproof container and they'll be good for about 6 months. And like I said, you just pull them out when you're ready to bake them. Of course you can bake them right now if that's your preference. So this morning I pulled 6 out of my freezer and baked them up, and they're just as wonderful as if they were freshly mixed and baked immediately. So I highly recommend that you try these freeze and bake blueberry cornmeal muffins.
I can't wait to show you my latest twist on French toast. It's super simple to put together and serves up hot and delicious with a crispy top and silky smooth layers below.
When you're making poached eggs for a crowd, like say you want to make eggs benedict for brunch, it can be really hard to get the timing right. Here's a hot tip. Use a muffin pan instead. Fill each compartment with a tablespoon of water, crack the egg in, and bake it at 350 for about 10 to 13 minutes. They'll come out perfect every time. French toast is always a real crowd pleaser. It's something I like to make when I'm camping as well. And this version you can prepare the night before and just slide it into the oven to bake when your guests arrive. So we've started with a cast iron skillet, and I have greased it on the inside with butter. You can use any heavy duty oven safe skillet, and of course you could use an oven safe baking dish if that's what you prefer to work with. So we're going to start by putting a layer of bread cubes in the bottom. This is just a nice robust white bread. Probably don't want to use white sandwich bread, but any bread that you like, sourdough, whole wheat, would be great. And try and get them in sort of a single layer as you see here. And of course you can scale this recipe up if you've got a larger pan, or even make 2 small pans, and that way they'll bake more quickly. So we'll set that aside, and now we're going to get the egg mixture going. So we've got some milk here in our measuring cup. To that, I'm going to add some heavy cream. You can use all milk if you prefer, or even a more generous mixture of, say, half cream, half milk. I'm going to put some eggs in there next. And again, these are room temperature eggs, as I've mentioned before, so that they're going to mix up a little bit more easily. And that way you don't get the clumps of egg white, which sometimes happen when eggs are cold. And feeling like a one-trick pony, cardamom again. You wouldn't believe how much cardamom I go through. Cinnamon, because that's a classic French toast spice, and a little bit of vanilla. Can't always taste it in the final product, but it sure makes it smell great when it's baking. So we're going to whisk this together just until the eggs are well blended. And this is the same kind of mixture you would be preparing if you were planning to dip your slices of bread in the mixture. And a quick note, if you are making dipped French toast like that, it's a great idea to let your bread sit out for half an hour or more so that it firms up a little bit on the outside. You don't want it stale, but if it feels just a little bit drier, you're going to have crispier French toast. So now I'm going to pour the mixture on, about half of it. And then I'm going to scatter some of my frozen peaches on top. You can use whatever fruit you like. I have so many peaches in the freezer from this summer. That's what I'm using. Blueberries would be great. I've made it with pears, apples, anything you like, really. Now we're going to put in another layer of the breadcrumbs. And the whole point of the layering is just so that everything kind of soaks in evenly. If we put all the bread in and then the milk, the upper layer might absorb more of the liquid mixture. The rest of our mixture here. And you don't want to overfill the pan because it will take a lot longer to bake if it's full right to the brim. Plus the eggs do puff up as they cook, so you need to leave room for that expansion. We'll put the rest of our peaches on top. And now we're going to press down on the surface with a spoon, your hand, spatula, whatever you've got. And the whole point of that is to get the bread to sink down a little bit into the liquid. And the resting time, whether it's 15 minutes or overnight in the fridge, is really ideal because it means that the bread gets thoroughly saturated, and that just adds to the texture and flavor of the finished product. So you can look at each piece of bread, and yeah, I can see that it's they're all nicely soaked. And the last thing I'm going to do is put on another sprinkle of cinnamon. My family likes a lot of cinnamon on their French toast. Now we're going to let it sit for 10 minutes and then I'm going to slide it into the oven. Here is our French toast hot out of the oven, and oh my goodness, it looks great and it smells really, really good. You need to let it cool for just a couple of minutes before you slice it into wedges, and then of course I always like to serve it with maple syrup. Whipped cream's great, even ice cream would be good with this delicious oven-baked French toast.
Coming up next is a terrific clean out the fridge dish that's similar to an omelette, but so much easier to prepare. Use whatever vegetables you like, but don't skip the addition of leftover pasta to make it extra hearty and satisfying.
The first time I combined eggs and pasta, it was an amazing moment. So I'm going to show you this dish that brings those two great things together in a make-ahead, bake day of. Wonderful brunch treat. Start with our eggs. You don't need quite one egg per person because there's so many other fillings going in this little casserole. All right. Fish that out. Now we're going to give the eggs just a little bit of a stir to get them started before we add in our other ingredients. Because these are room temperature, they're mixing up really, really easily. You can see the whites just separating beautifully. And before I forget, I'm going to add a little salt and pepper. I don't like to add too many seasonings to my eggs because I really want to be able to taste them. Now for our fillings. We've got our pasta already cooked here, so I can put that in. I think I'll use not quite all of it, about a cup's worth, I think. And the vegetables, it's carte blanche. You can really put in whatever vegetables you like. It can be a great clean out the fridge thing. I've got some mushrooms here, tomato and green onion. If you want to use sturdier vegetables like peppers or zucchini or regular onions, you may want to saute them first in a little bit of oil before you add them to the egg mixture. Just let them cool for a few minutes first. And that way they won't be firm once you get your finished dish out of the oven. And I think one mushroom is probably going to be enough. And now we've got our tomato. And I'm cutting the pieces fairly small so that they'll distribute evenly in the dish because we're going to bake our eggs in these small ramekins. You can definitely make them in a larger casserole dish, but I find that the small ones are just so nice for individual portions, especially if you're setting out kind of a brunch buffet, and then they can be there for people to just pick up and enjoy. All right, we'll clean off our board with these vegetables. And I do like onions and eggs together, so I'm going to use green onion because it doesn't need much cooking time. You could also use chives if you like, or if you have them in your garden. And as you can see, I'm not measuring the vegetables. It's just kind of an eyeball thing. You want to have a good amount of add-ins without overwhelming the eggs. Now we're going to drizzle in a little bit of milk. You can use cream if you prefer. You could use non-dairy milk. You could even use water. It's more just for a texture thing, not for flavor. And I really like eggs and ham together, classic combination, so I'm going to put that in. You could skip the meat. You could use diced prosciutto, really whatever you like. Cooked bacon would be also very delicious. And last but not least, I'm adding in some mozzarella cheese and also a little bit of Parmesan. And once again, we've got a lot of classic combinations here. Eggs with ham and cheese. It's just such a great thing. So I have quite a quantity here. I may have more than I need for my little ramekins, but that's okay. I can always get some more. Or I can even refrigerate this mixture for up to 48 hours and bake it later. So my dishes have been greased, and I'm just going to use this scoop to fill them, not quite to the top because the eggs will puff up, so they need room to expand. And as you're scooping, make sure you get a good amount of the great fillings to go with it. And once they're all filled, you just want to sort of check the liquid level because the egg tends to hide in the bottom of the mixing bowl, and maybe top them up if you need to. Looked like so much in the bowl, but I think it's actually going to be close to the right amount. I used leftover spaghetti from a dinner that I made the other night, but you can cook up pasta, especially for this if you want. I find that smaller shapes tend to be the best, and you would like to not overcook it. Just so easy with a scoop to fill these up. And I'm going to use the tilt the bowl method for the last one. And I can see I need to pinch a little out of the other ones. It is one of those things where you just have to eyeball it and don't get too worried about making them 100% even. All right, those look great. So next up, we can cover these, as I said, and refrigerate it for 12 to 24 hours, or if you're ready to bake them, they can go into the oven, and that's what I'm going to do. Our cheesy egg and pasta bakes are out of the oven, hot and ready to be enjoyed. They look so good, and they're the perfect single-size serving. The next time you're planning a brunch, why not make it easier on yourself by having a make-ahead menu? Whether it's this French toast, these beautiful cheese, egg, and pasta bakes, or the make and freeze blueberry muffins, you're sure to have a much better time if you're not rushing around the kitchen while your guests are having fun.